Good night, Shabbos. Today is Friday. Good Gimel Teves. Today we learn the fifth Perek of Eiruvin. We are halfway through the Masech, after only 10 chapters and 10 Parakim of Eiruvin. After coming off Masech Shabbos of 24 chapters, these Masechtas are much shorter. I think the next time you have such a huge Masechta is like 20, over 10 chapters is all down in Kalim. I'm not sure if you have any huge masechtas until then. Anyways, today's shiur is sponsored Lila Nishmas, Our Nachum Simcha Kayin, Nishul Mordechai Ben Shepsel, Bracha Sava Shmuel Leib, B'Yam Moshe Ben Yosef, Min Hashem will have an aliyah. And before Shlema for Adasar Bas Leah, Chana Pesel Bas Yenta, who I got a good report that these two names are doing better, but they're still on our list. But Baruch Hashem, they're feeling better. From our tefillas, Yisrael ben Rachaleah, Racha bas Pesel Zelda, Aram Yitzchak ben Risha, and Chaya bas Doba Bela, for Shalem of Sok Shar Chali Yisrael. Okay, Perek, hey, Mishnah Aleph. Now we spoke about the Techum being 2,000 amos. You go 2,000 amos outside the Techum. Well, we need to establish what the borders are of the city are. Now, the city borders, the actual borders, you pick any city on the map, you will see always an odd shape um, for the borders. But halachically, the borders are drawn as a square or a rectangle. It doesn't matter what shape the city is in. And you can't even define a city shape because every city on the map has a different shape to it. That's just the nature. Take any state, any country. Then there's no state or country that's like perfectly square, perfectly rectangle, or round, whatever. But luckily, every city that builds a tchum is based on square or rectangle dimensions. Period. So, which sometimes comes to benefit the city because the borders will be expanded luckily to fit that mold of the square or the rectangle, or it might come to harm them, depending on their shape. So, Mishnah Aleph, Keitzam Arbrin Es He'arim. How do we extend cities beyond their actual borders? What do you do? Bias Nechnas, Bias Yotze. If a city does not have a wall around it, rather its wall is a row of attached houses at the edge of the city, and in one place there's a house that is recessed into the city, and in another place there's a house that juts out just beyond it. Pagum nichnas pagum yotze. Or if the city has a wall, there's a tower that is recessed into the wall, and there is a tower that juts out just beyond the rest of the wall. Hayusham Gedudiyos Kavoas Asar Tvachim. Or if just outside the city there were broken walls of a ruined home that are 10 Tvachim high, or bridges or tomb buildings in which there is a place for a guard to live, in all of these cases, we move the line from which we begin measurement of the city's tchum out to a point opposite these places, meaning that we extend the city's borders to an imaginary line that runs from these places parallel to the city across that entire side of the city. This marks the new city border for purposes of measuring the tchum. If necessary, this is done on all four sides of the city. And if the city is shaped like a circle, we make it like a square tablet by drawing imaginary straight lines around it on all four sides. Today, niskar. So one gains the corners of the square drawn around the city. and the Techum is then measured from the edge of the square. You have like a circle inside a square, right? So you know that the circle doesn't reach the corners of the square, but you extend the city limits to be the edge of that square, kind of like in the pizza box. Let's go back to the pizza box. The perfect example. You have the round pizza inside the box. There are four corners that are kind of like empty space. Imagine that the pizza is your city, and the box is the dimensions that go around it. So the city limits would be extended to the corners of the pizza box, and that is your Techum. Okay, Mishnah Bays. Noisnin Karfif for ear, we grant the Karfif. Karfif, again, as we spoke about previously early in the week, is an open area of 70 and 2/3 amos. Where is it? This measure? So where does where does the number come from? It comes from the size of the chutzner of the Mishkan, as we discussed in Perek Beis. So it's an open area of 72 amas to a city, so that the city's borders are extended to the end of the open area, and we measure the city's tchum from there. Different Rabbi Meir. This is according to Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim said, "Lo amru karfif ala ben shtei ayaros." The Chachamim did not say to add a karfif to a city except to connect the two cities. Im yesh lezu shivim ama v'shirayim lezu shivim ama v'shirayim. I mean, if there are two cities that are close to each other, so if we add a karfif of no more than 70 amos and a fraction to this city, and another karfif of no more than 70 amos and a fraction to that city, right? Then these two karfifs would meet somewhere in the middle. Oh, said karfif l'shteyam liyos ka'achas. Then the karfif added to each city make the two cities to be like one large city for the purpose of the Techum. And according to the Chachamim, this is the only situation where we add 70 and 2/3 amos to a city. So you basically have two karfifs that are pretty much almost identical, like right next to each other. There's a little bit of a difference over there. And the 2,000 amos on all four sides after those cities, like that from the right and the left and the north and the south, top and bottom. Mishnah Gimel. So last Mishnah talked about two cities. Now we're talking about three. What if there are three villages that are grouped together like a triangle? That one of them stands opposite each other with a space between them, and the third stands some distance away opposite that space. The space between the two outer villages is such that if we were to imagine the entire third village being moved into that space, there would be no more than a 141 and a third amos left between the middle village and either of the outer villages. Then the middle village makes the three of them become like one large town for purposes of measuring their tchum. This is because we considered the three villages as if they're standing in a row, with the borders of each village extended by 70 and 2/3 amos. If there would be no more than 141 and a third amos between one village and the next, the borders of each village would reach those of its neighbor, and therefore they are all considered one town. Three villages in a larger town. And Mishnah Daled. And Modedin Ela Bechevel Shechamishim Amma. We measure the Techum only with a 50 amma rope, measuring 50, which is measuring 50 amos at a time until you reach 2,000 amos. Lo pachos, it cannot be less than 50 amos long, because the rope gets stretched and becomes longer than it's supposed to be. The shorter rope gets stretched longer. Although you're saying it can be more than 50 amos because a longer rope will sag in the middle when it's held by two people. Either way, the measurements of a longer rope or a shorter rope will be inaccurate. Below yumdod ala kenegalibo. Each may measure only with the rope held against his chest, so they both hold at the exact same height and not at an angle. That's assuming that they're both the same height. Or the gather. If he was measuring and he reached a valley or a pile of stones from a collapsed fence, Mavlio, he measures in a way that absorbs the slope of the valley or fence. If the width of the uneven ground from one side to the other is 50 amos or less, so that a 50-hour rope reaches across it, then he measures directly across the top. And when he reaches a place from which he can walk back to the even ground that is directly opposite the city, he returns to his original line of measurement and continues measuring from there. If he reached the mountain while measuring the Techum, he measures it in a way that absorbs the sides of the mountain, meaning that he measures over the top of it in a straight line, just as with a pile of stones. And if the hill is such that he has to move and measure from some point that is not opposite the city, he may do so, and he then returns to his original line of measurement. However, he may do so only as long as he does not go out of the Techum of the city for this purpose. If the measure is unable to absorb the slope made by the uneven ground by using a 50-hour rope, regarding this case, Rabbi Dustai Bar Rabbi Yanai said in the name of Rabbi Meir, I heard from my teachers that we make a hole through mountains. You can make the mountain. You can measure the mountain in a way that imitates drilling a hole through the bottom from one end to the other with a long measuring rope running through it. The length of that measurement is the distance that counts toward the Techum, and the slope of the mountain is thus not counted. Mishnah Hey. And measurements of the Techum is accepted only from an expert at measuring land. Riba the makom echad omiyet makom acher. If he measured the Techum farther at one point, and closer at another point, meaning when he measured the Techum from one corner of the city and measured it again from the opposite corner, one of the markers was farther out than the other. Showman the makom shabiba, we accept the measurement at the point where it came out farther, and the Techum for the entire side of the city extends to that point. Riba the echad omiyet the echad acher. If different people measured the Techum along the same line, and for one, the Techum was farther, and for another one, it was closer. Shomin the meruba. We accept the farther measurement as accurate. I feel shivcha ne'amanin lomar akan Techum Shabbos. Even if a Evet Kanani or a shivcha Kananis, who are usually not accepted as witnesses, are believed to say that the Techum Shabbos reaches until here. Because the kulas in this Mishnah are because the Chachamim did not say that when they established this Indian of Techumim that in cases of doubt we have to be strict. Rather, we are allowed to be lenient, which goes in line with Safik Derabanan, the Kula, and Safik Deraisa, the Chum. That was the Derabanan. Doubt, you can be lenient, and when it's the Deraisa, you have to be Machmir. Okay. So Mishnah Vav, this Mishnah briefly moves away from the topic of the city's Techum and discusses the halacha about making a shtufin mevayos for an entire city. The stufim mevayos, it allows carrying from courtyards to alleys, as we're going to discuss in the next chapter. Theoretically, all the streets in a properly enclosed city can be joined in one stufim mevayos, which would permit carrying anywhere in the city. However, the Chachamim were concerned that people seeing this might think it is permitted to carry even in Rishus Harabim. Therefore, they decreed that any city or streets might be confused with the Rishus Harabim must leave some part of the city out of its stufim mevayos in order that carrying be usher in some part of the city. This way, people will remember that it is usher to carry in the public domain. That's why they say that, like, once every now and then, you should experience a Shabbos without the Eruv, where the Eruv is down. So you remember that there's an Isser of Hotzah on Shabbos. Baruch Hashem, in months we have a very, very good Eruv, and it's been years since the Eruv ever went down entirely. I don't know, maybe I don't remember the last time it happened over here, but I remember like living in other parts of the country. Sometimes like in Florida, when there's a hurricane and the area goes down for Shabbos, like with Shabbos Eruv, or if you're in Brooklyn, or if you're in Long Island, every now and then the storm comes and causes the Eruv to go down. The Muncie hasn't. It's been many, many, many years. Which reminds me, since you're on the topic of Eiruvin, if you have a local Eruv in your neighborhood, support it. Give your annual dues to support the Eruv. Something that you don't even think about, but if you can carry your stuff to and from, assuming it's meant to carry on Shabbos, but talk about a talis bag or a bottle of wine or whatever it is you're allowed to carry on Shabbos with an Eruv, if you're able to do that or push a baby carriage on Shabbos, then you should definitely support your local Eruv. If you don't have one near you, then you could contact us and we'll recommend you want to support. Anyways, that's that disclaimer. Continuing Mishnah, if a city that used to be owned by one person now became the property of many people. Eiruvin Eskula, we may make one eruv for the whole city, even though it is now owned by many people. Even though it's now owned by many people, will not confuse the streets with the public domain, because it begins as a city owned by one person, which does not have a public domain. Like people that own like little villages out west, and there's like a whole population of 50. And the guy that owns the village, he's the balabus, and he's the baker, and he's the mayor, and he's the fire department. I don't know what the luck will be over there, but okay. So Yachid, on the other hand, if a city used to be owned by many people and now became the property of one person, its streets might still be thought of as Rishus Harabim, since it began as a city owned by many. Therefore, we may not make one Eruv for the entire city unless we make an exclusion from the Eruv. Ke'ir Chadasha Yehuda Sheyesh Ba Chamishim Diurim. Therefore, we may not make one Eruv for the entire city unless we make an exclusion from the Eruv. Ke'ir, I just said that. Sorry. Whose size is at least like the town of Chadasha in Judea, which have 50 residents. Rabbi Yehuda, this is according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Shalosh Chatzeros Shal Shnei Batim. It is sufficient to exclude from the Eiruvin area just 3 courtyards with 2 houses in each courtyard. Okay, Mishnah Zayin. We're going back to the topic of Techum, as we learned in Perek Daled yesterday, that a person's Techum is measured from his place of residence when Shabbos begins, which is ordinarily his home. However, if he places an Eruvin Techumim elsewhere, its location becomes his place of residence, and his Techum is measured from there. So in order for a person's Techum to be measured from his place of residence, whether his home or whether his Eruv is, he must be within 2,000 amos of it at the moment Shabbos begins. So we're not going to talk about a case with who it was, or someone who is within 2,000 amas of either his home or his eruv, but not both. So here we go. Mishnah Zion. Misha Mizrach, someone who was out in a field to the east of his house when Shabbos began. No, already Marav, and he had told his son before Shabbos, make an area for me to the west of my house, the Marav, or he was out in the field to the west of his house. No, already Mizrach, and he told his son before Shabbos, make an area for me to the east of my house. Then the halacha is as follows: Im yesh hemenu ulebeso alpine amos. If there are 2,000 amos or less between him and his house, ule eruva yoser mikan, but more than 2,000 amos between him and his eruv, mutter the vesa, then he is allowed to use the techum of his house, the also the eruvo, and he is not allowed to use the techum of his eruv. Although he wanted to make his Shabbos residence where his son put the eruv for him, he cannot use that place because he was not within 2,000 amos of it when Shabbos began. Since his eruv was ineffective, we assume that he wants his house, which is within 2,000 amos, to be his place of residence for Shabbos. He therefore receives the techum of his house. Uleruvo alpine ama. If on the other hand, there are 2,000 amos or less between him and his eruv, ulevesa yosem mikan, and more than 2,000 amos between him and his house, also the veso, and he is not allowed to use the techum of his house. Umotel eruvo, but he is allowed to use the techum of his eruv because he is within 2,000 amos of it, and that is where he wishes to make his Shabbos residence. I know saying as eruva be'ibura shiur, if he places his eruv in a structure that is in the extension of the city, meaning that he places it in a building that is within 70 and 2/3 amos of the city, lo asalaklum, he has accomplished nothing, meaning that his eruv has no effect, since the structure is included in the city's border in any case. If he placed it one amma outside the city's border, beyond the last structure that's included in the city, mash niskar humasid, then his error takes effect, with the result that whatever distance he gains in the direction of his error, he loses in the opposite direction. Because you only have 2,000 ammas in total. Okay. 2 more to go. Anshe Ir Gadola, Halchin, that's called Ir Katana. The residents of a large city may walk through all the small cities that are within their Techum, and it counts as it's just 4 of the 2,000 amos in that direction. Accordingly, they may walk in that direction 1,996 amos plus the area of the small city. So that's it. That's assuming the city is entirely within the Techum of the larger one. So it's obvious that people in the large city may walk all the way through it. We did not need the Mishnah to point that out. Therefore, the point of the Mishnah must be that the small city does not count toward the Techum of the largest city. The Anshi Irkatana Halchin is called Irgadola. But the residents of the smaller city may not walk through all of the large city that's only partially within the Techum. Every amma of the largest city counts toward the 2,000 in that direction. Therefore, they may walk in the large city only to the place where the 2,000 amos ends. Okay, son, how is this so? How do you have different rules for different people? If someone was in a large city, he places eruv in a nearby small city before Shabbos. Or if someone was in a small city and he places eruv in a nearby large city before Shabbos, then the city in which the eruv is located becomes his place of residence. The halach is kula, and he may walk through this entire city, counting it as his place of residence. An additional 2,000 amas beyond it in every direction. Rabbi Akiva says, "Ein lo ala limakim eruva alpayim ama." If one really pleases his eruv in a nearby city, but it's not when Shabbos began, it's not there when Shabbos began. He has only 2,000 amas from the place of his eruv, not from the city's borders. Amaleh, and finally, Mishnah test Amaleh Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said to the Chachamim, "Im ata modim li." Do you not agree with me? The no saying Eruva b'ma'ara, that if one places his Eruv in a cave, she'ein lo b'makim Eruva ela alpayim ama. He has only 2,000 amas in the place of his Eruv and not from the ends of the cave, and he cannot consider the cave as for amas. Likewise, one who places his Eruv in a city cannot consider the entire city his dalat amas. Amr lo, the Chacham said to him, Amos, when do we agree that one who places his Eruv in a cave cannot consider all of it as dalat amas? This man she'ein ba'diyurin, when it is not inhabitable because its walls have collapsed and it is no longer properly enclosed. In that case, even someone spending Shabbos in the cave could not consider all of it as for amas, and the same holds true if he merely puts his Eruv there. But when the cave is inhabitable, meaning that's properly enclosed, and he places his Eruv in it, then he may walk through the entire cave as if it is for amas, an additional 2,000 amas beyond it, just as if he were in it at the beginning of Shabbos. Likewise, one who places his Eruv in a city can consider all of it as dalat amas. And finally, Nimsa Kal Tocha Mi Al Gaba. It emerges that the inside of the cave, when it is inhabitable, is treated more leniently than its top, which is not. For if one places his Eruv inside a cave, he can treat all of it as just for amas, and he counts his Techum from its ends. When he puts his Eruv on top of the cave, he must count his Techum from the place of the Eruv. But regarding one who measures his Techum from his place of residence, Sha'amr Nosnin Lo Alpayim, about whom the Chachamim say that we give 2,000 amas from it, Shafilu Sov Midaso Kala Ara, we agree that even if his 2,000 amma measurement ends in the middle of an habitable cave, his Techum ends right there, and he may not walk farther into it. In this case, even the Chachamim agree that an inhabitable cave is not treated as dalat amas. Thank you for joining us this week. We will continue on Sunday morning with Perek Vav. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Stay safe and warm.